What is going on? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to another episode of the Lawron Ballard Show. I am your host, Lawron Ballard, and as always, we are here talking about everything that's in the headlines in regards to tax, money, business, and so on. And ultimately, my desire is not only to help you understand what's going on in the news and present it to you, but I want you to really have a grasp on how it impacts you. So as always, we're going to begin with news. What is going on in the news? And so the first thing that I want to share about is that starting this summer, we don't have a date. This was just released by the IRS maybe about a week ago. It is that they are getting rid of first-time abatement. And they are now implementing something essentially called an automatic abatement program. And I'm really excited about this, especially as a CPA, because I have spent countless hours on the phone with an IRS agent trying to talk through what I can do to get a client's penalty waived. And so this is a really big deal. What this means is that instead of having to talk to your accountant or tax preparer to address these penalties, the IRS is going to automatically review them. And then if they are able to waive the penalties, they'll just do it for you, which is fantastic. And so that's useful news because it actually changes something for taxpayers. Let's talk about something that actually has nothing to do with your life, but it is taking over the headlines, and that is Trump's IRS legal battle. So if you are aware, he had sued the IRS for inappropriately, according to him, releasing his tax returns. And so he was asking for a settlement of $1.8 billion to address the fact that his tax returns had been wrongfully disclosed. Well, that is no longer happening, but there are still some things that are taking place in regards to that battle. Emotions are high, as you can expect. And that's kind of been the tone of everything with this administration. Everything is personal. And so we will just see how this plays out. But again, what does this have to do with you? Absolutely nothing. It's just another thing to look at and shake your head. It's kind of like a bad car accident at this point. So I want to do something a little bit different in this show. So normally, this is the point where we transition to a case study, and we will get to a case study walking through how you can save on taxes. And we're going to do that a little bit differently. But today, I want to ask a question because I had this conversation with a client last week. If you stopped earning money today, if you could no longer make money, what would you do? How long would it be before your life changed? That's the question of today. And I have the answer. And this is where I'm going to be spending the bulk of this show really helping you all understand, what does it mean to be financially resilient? What does it mean to build your own economy? And so if we were to say it again, if your income stopped today, how long would it be before your life changed? So today we are going to talk about the components of building your own economy. So when we talk about the concept of financial resiliency, what we are discussing isn't just I make a lot of money, or I got a lot of money in savings. It's the mix of everything. I've got cash flow, I've got money in savings, I have flexibility, I have options. All of those things come together to create a financial plan that makes sense for you, for your goals, for your family. So for this client who I presented this to, I asked the question, I said, what would happen if your husband could no longer work? The husband is an attorney. The wife has pivoted into real estate and has been building her business, been doing well. But it it doesn't matter what happens if you're doing well, but you don't have a financial structure in place. So, the 4 things that you need to have in order to build financial resiliency. Number 1 is cash flow. How do we generate cash flow? We have 2 ways. We have active or we have passive. Active is what you do with your hands, what you do with your mind, something that you are actively involved in the generation of that income. That is active income. Passive income, on the other hand, is income that you sit back and you get a check. You need both. If you only have active income, then you are seriously in trouble. Why? Because you need a way to make sure that you are still generating income. So for this client that I mentioned this to, what did I recommend? So why don't we look at disability insurance? While you are in the process of building passive income, you need an opportunity to close the gap. And so with disability insurance, you usually get about 60% of your income paid to you for a certain amount of time. That can be long-term or short-term, excuse me. If that happens, if that is in if you work a W-2 job, they may have that available for you to get disability insurance. So that is one way that we're able to close that gap of cash flow. The second way that we're looking for, specifically for this client, on how we will close the gap is making sure that the rental properties that they have are profitable. At this point in time, they've just gotten into the real estate game. The wife is building up her book of business as a realtor. And so they're still in the building phase. Young couple, so they've got time. But here's the thing. If something were to happen and they can no longer build, we got to make sure that those rental properties pay for themselves. And so we've got to look at, what are the rents correct? Are we getting enough in income? Do we need to look at refinancing to get a lower rate so that the numbers can work? All of those things come into play when we're talking about cash flow. The second piece is emergency savings. So there are 4 pillars to financial resiliency. The second pillar is emergency savings. This is very straightforward. If you've heard Dave Ramsey, he recommends, I think it's 6 to 12 months in savings after you've gotten rid of your debt, and then you start saving for retirement. But this is the thing. This is all going to depend on your personal situation. So if you're a business owner, you may need to have you may need to have emergency savings sooner than what he recommends in his plan. Why? Because there might be ebbs and flows, seasonality in your business. And so you want to make sure that you have a cushion in place for that. But generally, we want to have an emergency fund, and we want to have that invested in a way that you get some type of return. So I'll let you in on what I'm doing personally. So I am using a high yield savings account to build up my cash reserve. And then once I get it to a certain point, the rest of that is going to be going into a money market account. The reason being is that I want my money working for me as I'm building my reserve, and it's working for me while it's sitting there, but I also want to have some cash that's readily available. And so I'm going to use the high yield savings account plus a money market to layer them on top of each other so that I'm still earning interest while that money is there as a cushion. The third pillar of financial resiliency is flexibility. Are you able to pivot and make changes quickly? If you cannot make changes quickly, if you cannot pivot quickly, then you are not financially resilient. And so we have to start thinking about, how can I get some flexibility in my financial situation? Is that I need to change where I live? Is that I need to refinance? Is that I need to pay off some debt? Is that I need to have savings? Is that I need to have another source of income? All of those things determine your level of flexibility. You should be able to ask yourself, if I made this decision today, would anything in my life change? Or by me making the decision, a whole bunch of things, there's a cascade of events, a cascade of fallout from that. Then we have an issue. So that is the third pillar that we have to assess when we're talking about financial resiliency. And then the third thing is having options. So this is related to flexibility. You want to have options in your finances. If you decide that you don't want to work anymore, your financial situation should be able to support that. If you want to have children, your financial situation should be able to support that. If you don't want to have children, but you want to travel internationally for 6 months, your financial decisions need to be able to support that. That is so important. And so everything that we are doing and what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks and months is, how do we create financial resiliency for you personally, for you and your business? And in doing so, you put yourself in a better financial position. And so where does tax planning come into this? Tax planning is the way that you can take money that was going to get paid out and allocate it to address one of these things. So if I owe $15,000 in taxes, $100,000 in taxes, $300,000 in taxes, it does not matter the money, the amount. If I owe that money to the government, that is money that I can no longer use to address one of these 4 pillars. But if I now have a tax plan in place and I can take that money and put it somewhere to get passive income, well, now I'm starting to address that cash flow issue. If I take and I save $20,000 and I don't have any emergency savings, well, now I'm able to address that savings issue. Tax planning is an integral part of financial resiliency. And if you do not have a tax plan, doesn't matter if you make $100 or $100 million, if you do not have a tax plan, you are now giving the government money that you were entitled to keep. And so I want to just empower you to make sure that you're making decisions so that you can build your own economy. So let's jump into a case study. I want to jump into this case study and I want to walk you through what this looks like. And we're going to layer on financial resiliency in addition to the tax plan. So we have a client who is a business owner, and they need help addressing their tax liability. Their annual income is about approximately $492,000. We'll call it $500,000 for the sake of ease. They have two sources of income, W-2 and the income from their business. They are a business owner. They are a media entrepreneur. This person is single. This person has no children. So automatically there's a couple things that are off the table that we hear a lot on the internet. We don't have any kids to hire. We don't have a spouse who can do real estate for us. So where can we go now? So whenever I'm building out a tax plan for a client, I'm always thinking about what makes sense for you. It is never cookie cutter. It is always custom. We want to make sure that we're building a tax plan that's specifically for you, for your goals, and for your needs. Now, with this client, this did not happen, but let's just assess. Let's walk through. So as you're building your own tax plan, or if you're working with your tax professional to build this out, these are the things that I want you to start thinking about. So let's just say that this client has been doing well in business, but they have not done anything in regards to cash flow, emergency savings, flexibility, or creating optionality for themselves. So what we're going to do with this case study is that we're also going to layer on how we would address this. So the first thing that we're going to do in order to address the tax bill. So let me also give you this. The estimated tax liability for the year is just shy of $200,000. That is almost 50% of their income that's going to pay taxes. That is a problem. That is a major problem that we've got to address. And so here are the three things that we are going to select for this client to help them lower their tax bill. Number one, we're going to maximize retirement contributions. So I didn't mention that this client is under 30. So I'm sure that the majority of 20-something-year-olds are not necessarily thinking about retirement. They're doing well for themselves, but they're not necessarily thinking about retirement. But retirement is an easy way for you to manage your tax bill, whether you are an employee, a W-2 employee, or a business owner. It's very easy. It has direct benefit for you from a tax perspective, but then it also starts addressing the having flexibility and emergency savings issue. This is just one strategy, and this is how it has a direct impact on your financial resiliency. The next thing, board of directors. So if you are not familiar with this, you are able to bring on a board of directors for your business. And what that board is going to do, it's going to help you think through what you're doing in terms of the business growth, strategy, etc. And you are able to compensate your board members for their support and their oversight in your business. And when you do that, you get a deduction from the business. The last strategy, and this is one thing that I always recommend for my higher income earning clients. If you have capital to invest, you're always going to get a quick ROI from a tax perspective when you invest that money. So this client, they did foreign exchange trading. And in doing that, they were able to lower their tax bill. So where did this leave us? So once we layered on these three strategies, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that you only need 3 to 5 strategies to completely change what's going on in terms of your finances. Only 3 to 5 strategies. It's not 50, it's not 20. If you have a handful of well-selected strategies, you can significantly reduce your tax bill. It is that simple. So this client went from owing almost $200,000 in taxes to not paying anything. They are not paying anything. So let's now layer on our financial resiliency. If we save $200,000 in taxes, $200,000 in taxes, and let's say they needed to invest, they had to invest 100,000 to get these strategies to work for them in the way that they wanted them to work. They have $100,000 to allocate now to addressing these gaps. So cash flow, $100,000, you can immediately put that into a passive real estate deal. You can invest in REITs. You can look at mutual fund investing. You start generating cash flow through passive investments. You could take a portion and put that there. You can take, very simply, we could just do 25, 25, 25, 25. We put 25 in cash flowing assets. We put another 25 towards emergency savings. We put another 25 towards a maybe short-term savings, or putting it away, specifically earmarking for certain things. You could be reinvesting it. You could be reinvesting it in terms of your business to create flexibility. You could be doing things to reinvest personally to create flexibility. It doesn't matter. There are options. And then the last thing is 25,000 to having options. What does that look like? For some clients, that could be, I want to take 6 months off. Then you put the money there to take 6 months off. That could mean I don't want to work in 20 years. So that could mean putting it towards retirement, or creating a cash balance plan where you're able to contribute more. Ultimately, I just want you guys to understand that tax planning, when we are able to recover these savings, it is not just for the savings' sake. We are literally trying to use the money to plug these holes. That's all that this is about. That's all that this is about. So we are just about out of time for today's show. I want to make sure that there are no questions. Are there any questions? I'm about to scroll. And what's going on to my TikTok family? I always like to say hi to y'all. What is going on? What's up? What's up? What's up? Let's see. See if there's any questions. See if there's any questions. I'm scrolling through. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, I have my phone set up over here for my folks on TikTok. So just want to scroll through and make sure that they feeling loved, feeling supported. And I want to make sure that I'm grabbing their questions if there's any. Cool. All right, so it does not look like there's any questions there, but I got a few. So this is a good one. Can I deduct my car payment or car loan interest on my taxes? This really, I hate that this is always the answer. It depends. So if you do not have a business, then generally, prior to the One Big Beautiful Bill, you cannot deduct anything related to your car if you didn't itemize. Now, as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill, if you purchase a US made car, there are certain requirements to meet, but you can potentially deduct the loan interest starting in 2026. Question number 2. I made a lot of money this year. Is there anything that I can still do to reduce my taxes before year end? There's a whole lot you can do. We have about 6 months left in the year. And quite honestly, the peak tax planning time is between September and November. If you get something in play over the next couple months, you are golden in terms of tax planning for the year. So there's absolutely plenty of time to make something happen. Should I elect S Corp status for my business? So this is a great question. The answer to this is, what do you want to do with your business? So if you're looking to grow your business to Nike level, then S Corp is not going to work for you. If you are just looking for a way to lower your tax bill, it may be an option. If you are at a certain income level, it'll probably make sense for you. If you are beyond, I want to say maybe 800,000, it actually might be worth looking at a C Corp. You may save being a C Corp as opposed to an S Corp. So all of those things are dependent on what your goals are, where you're at in terms of your finances to answer that question. Can I hire my kids in my business? Absolutely. You absolutely can hire your children in your business. They can be babies. If you are doing some type of marketing thing and they are a model, you would just pay them appropriately for the work that they're doing. But generally, you want them to be able to manage some age appropriate tasks. And usually that's about like 6, 7. I'm not going to say for sure, but you want them to be able to follow directions well and actually be a help as opposed to just trying to get a write-off. What's the biggest tax mistake you see high income earners make? The biggest mistake is assuming that tax planning is the end of the conversation. They may have a wealth manager, they may be working with me or somebody like me to help them with tax planning. But if they are not working together in tandem and ultimately looking at their overall financial situation, helping them put themselves in a better place to address cash flow, to increase optionality, to increase savings, and ultimately get to the place where they're self-insured, then there's work to be done. So before we end today, I just want to let you know that if you are joining for the first time, you can find all the previous episodes on YouTube at Lawron Ballard CPA on YouTube. You can find us there. And I want to encourage you to ask yourself this question. What would happen if you lost your job, if you couldn't make the money that you made, if you lost your spouse who is the breadwinner, whatever that looks like? If the tap was cut off, what would you do? And if you don't have an answer to that, then I encourage you to tune in next week, because over the next couple of weeks, we will be diving heavily into financial resiliency. And I want you to be in a place where you are not taken by surprise. This world is crazy. Things are up, things are down. The market is up, the market is down. You cannot control those factors, but what you can do is control your own life and your own decisions. And so my desire is just to help you and empower you to make the best decisions for yourself. So if you need more help addressing how to become financially resilient for yourself, please feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to help you along with my team. If you have any questions that you want me to review on the show next week live, please send emails to questions@hilltownadvisors.com, and I would be happy to support you. As always, we do these shows every single Wednesday, about 2:15-ish to 2:45-ish. Always a pleasure to serve you. Until next time.